All right, I'm going to try this one more time. I'm really sorry for anybody who had to kind of waste their time on the previous ones, but it looks like my network is back stable. So let me just reiterate what I'm talking about today. So there is a common set of confusions around how playback templates in Dorico, how endpoints, how they're all related to things like playback techniques and playing techniques, articulations, and expression maps. I cover expression maps a lot on my channel, and it's clear that this is a very challenging topic, and it's certainly one that I'll cover more. But the focus today is on a particular workflow problem that I imagine a lot of people out there have, and that is where you've instantiated an instrument within Dorico, and then a week later you instantiate another instrument, and then maybe you buy a new instrument, and before you know it, you've got this project that's just kind of a mismatch of instruments, and it's not really that coordinated or organized, but you're desperately frightened about making any changes to it because the whole thing feels a bit like a house of cards and it's working, so don't mess with it. I wanted to offer some of my solutions for how you can conform your instruments into organized endpoints pretty quickly and in a pretty easy way, and how that actually starts to improve the troubleshooting process if you're trying to get stuff to work reliably, and explain, hopefully in the process as well, a little bit more clearly what endpoints and playback templates are. So let's look at a demonstration here. I need to load up my Stream Deck here so that I get my button to take me off. There you go. Okay, so let's take this example. Over Black Friday, I bought this female choir from Metropolis Arc, and I bought this one instrument that was on an Orchestral Tools sales a while back. And then I've had this trumpet it's in Contact, it's part of Session Horns Pro, and I like it. It's a muted trumpet, and I needed to use a muted trumpet recently, so I loaded that up. So these are just 3 examples, and the way I've got these set up, I have 2 sign players, one for the female choir, one from the tagelharpa, and one for the muted trumpet. So at this point, you know, I've got these all loaded up, but maybe the problem with just continually doing this is that this is just for this project. It's not reusable. It's not easy to see how these are all organized. And so we're going to start with naming. Just naming things makes such a huge difference, right? So this is how I'm going to go ahead and change this so that it says choir, right? So I'm going to click on the little cog, brings up this window, and I'm just going to change this to choir and hit OK. All right. Then I'm going to go to this one and do the same thing, but this one I'm going to call the Grimm. That it's part of the Grimm library, is actually the name of the library. And this one I am going to go ahead and call this brass aux for auxiliary, because it's not brass that I typically use, but it's definitely a part of the brass family. So now instead of having sign player, and Contact, I have 3 things that make a lot more sense to me. Now, as I'm putting these together, I want to have a way to reuse these. And the way I'm going to reuse these is by creating endpoints. And let me talk a little bit about what an endpoint is. So an endpoint brings together an expression map and the configuration of an instrument into one unit. So once I set the expression map for the instrument, then I can actually save that as an endpoint. And anytime I load up that endpoint in the future, it's going to sort of correlate the correct thing with it. Let me just, yeah, I hear you, man. I'm just looking at some comments here. Thank you, Matthew, for joining. And thank you, Rich, for confirming that we're back online. I'm really sorry about that. Yeah, so endpoints. I'll diverge just quickly to say that a lot of the confusion that I see in comments stems from a misunderstanding about what playing techniques are, what expression maps are, what endpoints are, and what playback templates are. And I've been deep in this stuff for a long time, so to me, it has become clear, and I can promise you that on the other side of this long walk, to really get to grips with how Dorico handles playback, it is structured actually in a very helpful and intelligent way. But these terms, endpoints, playback templates, expression maps, it's not easy to see what these do. So anyway, back to my example. Let's say you've got these three instruments. You set them up just like I have in my situation. I think this must be so common. You buy a new library and you just wanted to use that, that one instrument here, and you load it up. And then you go to your next project and you're like, well, how do I get that instrument from 3 projects ago in here? How do I make that seamless? And how do I make it reliable so that I can just know that when I load up this muted trumpet in a future project, even better, what if I could load it up from the setup in Dorico, right? So it's all possible. So a quick aside here is about setting up custom instruments. So I had to set up this taggle harpa. Obviously that's a weird instrument. What I did was I set it up as a member of a family that I just called Grim, because that's the instrument. So I went to Instrument Families. This is in the library menu. And I created a family called Grim. You can just use the usual tools down here. And always want to hit a star to make sure that it saves as default, shows up in future projects. Then I went up to library again, down to Instruments. And this is where I created my taggle harpa. I just started with a treble staff instrument. So I went to treble staff like that. And then I duplicated it. And then I renamed all the elements. And that's how I wound up with my taggle harpa, like this, right? And the nice thing about setting it up as an instrument and setting it up connected to this family up here, I actually connected to this family Grim, is that now I can easily go to my setup menu and I can find it in the new player, right? I can see taggle harpa there. Now, if for some reason you set up an instrument and you cannot find it there, I'll tell you why that is. That was because, and you set up the instrument, always make sure that this little star is clicked, and then you should see it reliably. Okay. So that was just kind of a quick aside for how sort of fluid that this can actually get. But let's talk about, we've got these 3 instruments and I want to use them in the future. Well, let's say this Grim, particularly taggle harpa, I want to be able to load that taggle harpa in the future and have it load the correct expression map, the correct instrument, all this sort of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this cog again where it says endpoint setup. I get this and I can see that on port 1 I have this horn F assigned. That is probably because I created this taggle harpa from another instrument. And if we go into, let's see why it's called taggle harpa, or sorry, why it's called horn, because it shouldn't be. I'm going to go into edit names, make sure that everything is set up correctly. And I've got Grim set up here. So this is one of those things that can be really confounding and frustrating, that, why do we see horn F here? And honestly, even I'm not sure exactly, and I don't want to spend too much time organizing it. But what I can see is that I have an instrument. I would expect this right here to say taggle harpa. And it correlates to channel 1 and port 1 on this endpoint. Now, if I go down here and I click Save Endpoint Configuration, and I'm going to call it Grim, and I'm just going to call it Demo so that I can keep track of this. I'm going to want to delete these after my example. Okay. Let's take an example where I wanted to aggregate all three of these instruments into one new thing. Come up here, and again, save endpoint configuration choir. I'm going to call it demo. And then I'm going to come to my brass augs, and again, save endpoint. And what I'm doing here by saving endpoints is I am saving the combination of expression maps and instruments. If I wanted to assign a specific expression map to this instrument, I could come over here and I could choose my expression map. And then when I save my endpoint, that's going to be saved in there. Okay. If you resave it, it's always going to ask you, do you want to overwrite? Go ahead and hit OK. Hey Shubis, thanks for joining. And yes, I'm glad to hear that you are feeling like you're getting a handle on some of these things, because they can really be profoundly confusing. So at this point, what we've done is we've saved these instruments as they're configured in this project as an endpoint. And that's the thing that's going to allow me to reuse them down the road, so that when I'm in a project 3 months from now and I'm like, you know, I really wanted to use that muted trumpet. How do I get it into my project reliably without going back and opening that project and saving a template and doing all that sort of time-wasting stuff? How do I get this into a reusable form? I've saved all these instruments as an endpoint, and this is a good policy to just get into when you create a new instrument in any project, because then it becomes accessible. And I'm going to show you where. So let's say that I wanted to create a new playback template. A playback template's function is to load a whole bunch of endpoints. So it's sort of like put all your endpoints together in one playback template, and now you have them all in one place. Now I've created this, the one that I almost always use is this endpoint playback template called Maestro, but I'm going to create a new one. And this playback template, I'm just going to call demo. And when I go to click add manual here, I can see these are all my endpoints. Let me zoom in so you can see these are different endpoints that I've created, or that Dorico had created for me automatically at some point. So I can just go ahead, anytime you've saved an endpoint from any previous project, it's right here. So even if it wasn't saved in this project, it was saved in a project 3 months ago or something, it'll be right here in this list. So I can just grab them all, and I'm just going to go, okay, I'm going to add that. Whoops, I didn't mean to add 2 of them. Going to go ahead, add choir, and I'm going to add the Grim demo. Okay, and then I'm going to save this as an endpoint. And now, watch this. If I go ahead and select this endpoint, this playback template, sorry, and I hit apply and close, it's going to delete all these instruments, and it's going to reload them, and it's going to connect them up correctly. So this is just the process. You'll see these buttons dim up here. That's a sign that it's reloading instruments. As soon as those light up again, we know that it's all set up. So what we've got over here is a bunch of instruments that represent these. So this is connected to choir, and this is connected to Grim, and this is connected to brass auxiliary again. There's got my muted trumpet, my taggle harper, which is and my female choir. So the process is that when you've set up an instrument, whether or not you do that setup instrument, setup family thing, that's just an organizational tool. It's a benefit, I think. It's good to get into. It's not really the topic, so I'm not going to get into it a lot. But the main topic is, how do you make these instruments reusable, and how do you reduce the possibility of getting confused? Because this can be very confusing, and you can wind up with stuff like it's saying it's a horn, but it's a taggle harp, and what happened? Not every problem is going to be solved in today's live stream, but hopefully what you can see is that learning to save your instruments as endpoints is the key that makes it possible to reuse them in the future and have a reliable experience. An endpoint puts together an expression map and an instrument. A playback template puts together a bunch of endpoints. So at the top of the chain, you got a playback template. It contains a bunch of endpoints. Each endpoint contains a bunch of instruments and expression maps, because as you can see in one of these windows, you could actually have, this be female choir, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. You could have all of these filled with instruments, all correlated to their different expression maps. So an endpoint can actually hold a whole collection of instruments and expression maps. And so then you've got your instruments and your expression maps, and we've talked a lot on this channel about expression maps especially. But then once you have this hierarchy clear in your mind, you can see that you can troubleshoot, if the articulation's wrong, it's not triggering correctly, that's in the expression map. It has nothing to do with playback templates or endpoints or even the instrument. If the articulation is being triggered correctly, or you're not sure that's the problem yet, it's not even loading the right instrument and expression map on its own. You loaded up a new instrument and it's just blank, it's not doing anything. Well, that's an endpoint problem. And then if you load up a playback template and it loaded the wrong instruments, maybe it saw a muted trumpet, but it loaded a sax or something weird like that, that's at the playback template or endpoint level. So by being able to narrow in on the level of this hierarchy that you're trying to troubleshoot, it reduces your confusion a lot, makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot and get right to the point. So there's been a lot of comments here. I really appreciate everybody chiming in, and I just want to read them and see what's coming up here. Yeah, that's Star Matthews. It's very powerful. You'll see it. You'll see the star on creating instruments, creating playing techniques, anything where you can duplicate or create a new one. You'll see that star, and what that star means is make this available in future projects by default. So super, super helpful. Why would it be called endpoint? Is there another word that would be intuitive, understand what it is? Yeah. I don't know why it's called an endpoint. What I would say, without wanting to cast too many stereotypes, is that the engineers at Steinberg are very intellectual. They're extremely smart people. They've made fantastic software that I rely on every day, and I often discover things about it that make me think, oh my gosh, these people are real smarty pants, right? But they use terms like endpoint, and that's just the way it is. It's strange, so you just have to learn it. Yes, that's a really good reminder, Shubhas, about setting the version counter. So I will just demonstrate that quickly for anybody who doesn't know that. This has to do with playback templates. And when you are updating a playback template, let's say that I went and I made a significant change to Tagelharpa, and I went in here to my playback templates and I edited it, right? What I might do is just take that out and re-add it, and then unlock this and change my version to 2, and that is going to update my playback template. So changing that version number is the surefire way to make sure that the playback template actually gets updated. So that is a little extra step, but thank you for reminding me, Shubhas. That's really important. Just following through here. Yeah, the endpoint template relationship is just not covered a lot in their documentation, and oh my gosh, it changes the game, changes the whole experience. Won't things reload? This is Rich's question. Won't things reload after saving a project, then just use that project as a template? You can definitely do that. So if that is a solution, if I were to save this project as a template, so that's just going up to the file menu and going save as project template like that. Then if I use this in the future, it will have all these instruments in here. What I find, I do use templates a lot. I have one main template, and it's got almost all the instruments that I might ever use in it. And then I just check them off for my flows in order to conform the project, the ensemble that I need for that project. And it's a great way to do it. There are some things that are only saved in templates. For example, fonts. And I won't get into this a lot, but if you come up here and, let's say you decide that you want your default font text, as I often do, to be something different, right? There's that star again. If you change a font, don't expect to see it in a future project unless you save the template. Another thing, if you use custom playing techniques like this and you go in, you add some custom playing technique. The Tagelharpa has all kinds of playing techniques that don't belong to any other instrument, like cluster. Plays a cluster of notes like an aleatoric thing. So if I create that here, don't expect to see it in future projects unless you saved it as part of a template. So saving a template is a great way to do this, but I definitely would recommend to anybody who's getting serious about Dorico to separate out your playback template and endpoints from your template. The template really should be what instruments are preloaded and what are your fonts. The playback template and endpoints should be all about what's those relationships between instruments and expression maps that you want to be able to rely on time and time again. Let me just see if there's any more comments. Glad it helps, Matthew. Glad it helps. Please check back and come watch the videos. I cover this stuff a lot, and I'm always open to questions as well. Yep, Shubis, great workflow point about test these endpoints. Creating a group endpoint and then test it, it really pays dividends. It's a pain in the butt, but it pays dividends when you can just come into your studio and work. On your last comment, Shubis, how do I like the Grimm library? Totally off topic, but I love it. I just bought the one instrument, so I'm on Orchestral Tools mailing list, and they have these sales where they'll put one instrument from one of their collections on sale for like a day or two. And if I think it's useful, it does something that I might enjoy, then I pick it up. They're usually like $50 or something like that, and I love it. So I only have the one instrument, but if you can see from its ads what they're targeting, and if you think you might write music like that, then it's really good for that. All right, so I'm at 22 minutes. I am going to wrap it up. I appreciate everybody coming out and checking out the video today. Thank you so much. If you are new to the channel, watching this later down the road, please do like and subscribe. Helps me out a lot. Leave questions in the comments if you have them as well. Appreciate everybody's support, and I will see you again on Wednesday. All right, take care. Bye.